Now, one of the other thing that we see with candidates who often message us regarding the initial assessment, and they ask us whether we should go for registration only or registration and skills assessment or skills assessment only. Now, ADC has these details very clearly mentioned on their website, and it says what application type should candidates choose when applying to the ADC. Now, the first option is registration only. This type of application involves assessment of your competence but does not include an assessment of your professional skills for migration purposes. This application should be selected when candidates needs to complete the ADC process for overseas qualified dental practitioner for registration, but do not require to apply for a new visa to live and work in Australia. For example, if they're already an Australian resident or citizen, all right? Now, what does this basically mean? It means that you're finishing your ADC exams and you're getting registered with APRA, all right? Once you're registered with APRA, you can work in Australia legally because you already have a visa to stay in Australia, which means, like they have mentioned, that either you are an Australian resident or citizen, or once you finish the ADC journey, you will become one, which means you will become an Australian resident or citizen by that time. So, all those candidates who do have a visa to stay in Australia, who do have the legal rights to be in Australia legally, they just need to select the registration only option. All right. Why? Because once you are done with the ADC exams, which is the ADC written exam as well as the ADC practical exam, you just have to register yourself with APRA by submitting the documents and filling the APRA registration form. And once you receive the outcome from APRA, you will be legally allowed to stay in Australia and, of course, legally allowed to practice as a dentist in Australia. Okay. Now, those candidates who have, let's say, a student visa, and once you finish the ADC journey, you think that your student visa will be converted to something that will let you stay in Australia for a long time. Again, you can only go for registration option only. Those candidates who are on spouse visa, again, registration only because your spouse visa will be automatically converted to a PR or citizenship within the next few years. So anyone who has a visa or will have a visa to stay in Australia legally for a long time or permanent basis just can go for registration only option. Now, the other thing is over here, the catch is even if you go for registration only option and you don't have a visa to stay in Australia, let's assume that situation, right? Let's assume that you're currently outside Australia preparing for the ADC written or the practical exam, and you don't have the right to be in Australia, you don't have a visa to be in Australia permanently, right? You still can go for registration only option, right? Once you finish the ADC written and the practical exam, you can do the skills assessment with ADC at that time as well. All right. Because skills assessment is something that is helping you with the migration process, with the visas, for example, work sponsored visa, employer sponsored visa, 491, which is state sponsored visa. All these visas, they require a skills assessment, which is a points based system, right? So even if you select registration only now and you finish the ADC journey, which is both exams, you can still opt for skills assessment with ADC. All right. There, of course, will be an extra payment involved, which is a couple $100 only. Once you do that, ADC gives you a skills assessment letter, which you can use for your visa purpose, right? So you can even do that later on. Please remember that. You can still opt for registration only now. Once you finish the ADC exams, you can still get the skills assessment letter from ADC. All right. But of course, you can go with registration and skills assessment, like it says here. This type of application involves both an assessment of competence and an assessment of professional skills For migration purposes, this application should be selected for candidates who need to complete the ADC process for overseas qualified dental practitioner and who also need to apply for a new visa to live and work in Australia. So to keep it simple, all of you can technically go for registration only now. All right? Whether you are in Australia or you're not in Australia. You can go for the registration only option now, and then later on, once you finish the ADC process, you can apply for skills assessment with ADC, and they will give you the skills assessment letter. Basically, it's an extra step that is involved. If you go for registration and skills assessment now, this extra step will be eliminated once you finish the ADC process. All right. But let me tell you again, you can go for registration only option now, and you can go for skills assessment later on once you finish the ADC journey. Skills assessment is basically a process where ADC assesses your skill, which is work experience, the places that you have worked, how long you have been working there, the years of experience, and then they create a skills assessment letter which you use when you're applying for a visa to move to Australia. Okay. You always have an option to go for registration and skills assessment from the start if you're outside Australia and you don't have a visa to stay legally in Australia. You do have that option, all right? At times, certain times, candidates don't like to go for that option because they don't have the required documents that they need to submit for the initial assessment. So you can always go for registration only because registration only does not require a lot of documents compared to if you go for registration and skills assessment. All right. So the process is simple. If you have a visa to stay in Australia, or you will have a visa in the next few years to legally stay in Australia, please go for registration only. If you do not have a visa to stay in Australia, or you will not have a visa to be in Australia in the next few years, please go for registration and skills assessment. Now, even if you don't have a visa to stay in Australia, or you won't have a visa to stay in Australia in the next few years, you can still go for registration only. But please remember, once you finish the registration and the exams, the practical and the written exam, you will have to apply for a skills assessment letter if you want that letter to be used for the visa purposes or the migration purposes. All right. So pretty much simple. All right. Try to keep it simple. Don't keep it complex. You always have the option to just go for registration, even if you're outside Australia, but you have to go with the step of skills assessment later on once you finish the ADC journey. Okay. So three options: registration only, skills assessment only, registration and skills assessment. Candidates who are in Australia legally, have a visa to stay in Australia legally, or will have a visa to stay in Australia legally in the future can just go for registration only. Candidates who do not have these minimum requirements, do not have a visa to stay in Australia, or will not have a visa to stay in Australia in the future, should go for registration and skills assessment because the skills assessment is required for them to apply for visa and migration purposes. Let's say you are outside Australia, you don't have a visa, you're applying for ADC, you can still go for registration. Once you clear the ADC exams, you can apply for skills assessment by paying a couple $100 extra. They will give you a skills assessment letter, and that can be used for visa and migration purposes. All right. So I think it's pretty simple. Don't get it complex. In all situations, you can go for registration only and get your skills assessment later on. Now, the other thing which is important is to remember that registration only and registration and skills assessment only has different requirement of documents from you. So if you go for registration only, the number of the documents that they require is a bit less compared to if you go for registration and skills assessment. So it is up to you how you would like to take it. All right. It doesn't make any difference to the ADC exam process, which is the written exam and the practical exam, and it doesn't make any difference to the outcome of the written or the practical exam. All right. Now, one other thing that I want to share with you all is the professional reference letters and the work experience letter, how it should be, because ADC rejects a lot of these letters because they are not properly formulated, properly documented. All right. I'm just going to share that with you. Now, this is basically the sample professional reference letter because if you're going for registration and skills assessment, ADC wants professional reference letters from you, right? So this is how it should be. Please make sure that you watch it, take pictures of that, and formulate something similar to it. Don't exactly copy paste it, all right? So this is basically the sample that I have created, okay? And these are all the things that needs to be included exactly how it is. If you formulate a professional reference letter this way, there is no way ADC will reject it. Okay. And you also have this guide from ADC, which basically tells you how you need to do it. It tells you what the professional reference letters must include. And these are the points which they have mentioned. And they have also mentioned the reasons why the professional reference will not be accepted. If they are, they have mentioned all the reasons for that, right? And they have given you a sample as well. So please spend some time going through this because it will prevent unnecessary rejections of your initial assessment. Now, also please remember that the initial assessment is basically not rejected as a whole. It just delays if you don't provide them appropriate documentation. All right. If the ADC requires any further clarification from you, they will always ask you for that. Your initial assessment, once you submit it, is never rejected. If there are further clarification, further documents ADC needs, they will always ask you for that. Please remember that. Make sure you go through it and note down the points because it does make a lot of difference and helps you avoid unnecessary delays with the outcome of your initial assessment. All right. And then the other thing important, which we see a lot, is the work experience letter, how it should be. Again, have formulated a sample. Please just copy it. Your life will be very easy. Don't complicate it. Keep it simple. But of course, it should include the bare minimum requirements that the ADC wants in a work experience letter. All right. And then I have mentioned here it should contain all this information. That's very important because these are the most important reasons for the rejection of the work experience letter. All right. So watch this video carefully, okay? And make sure that you implement these points. It's pretty simple. Don't waste your time confused about registration or skills assessment. Don't make mistakes in the professional reference letters. Don't make mistakes in the work experience letters. Give it to ADC all in one go without any unnecessary delays that might cause if you don't provide proper documentation, inaccurate documentation, documentation that lacks evidence, the documentation that lacks the bare minimum requirement that the ADC have asked you for, right? So yeah, that's basically it. Thank you.